Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Asia Mallory. I'm the consumer staff attorney here at the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. I have my colleague along with me, Amy, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Amy Hennen. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Financial Stabilization at MVLS.
So before we start this presentation, I just want to let you all know that you all can follow us on social media. We have our Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube accounts. You can also go to look for cases on our pro bono portal. That's where we put all of our volunteer cases for you all. As well as our website also hosts resources for our MVLS volunteers. This is what our pro bono portal looks like. And if you have any questions that come up during this presentation, don't hesitate to put your questions into the question box or the chat box. Amy and I will be monitoring the chat box so we can answer your questions. So this presentation is about prioritizing debt, what to do when your client is struggling. So some quick tips about negotiating debt is that the first step you want to do is make sure that you know who the creditor is, who exactly the creditor is. Many times the original creditor will sell the outstanding debt to a debt buyer, and the debt buyer will be the company or the organization that is calling and harassing your client. So you just want to make sure that you know who exactly is the debt collector and who is calling your client. When it is a debt collector calling the client or a debt buyer calling your client, definitely make sure you request a verification of the debt. We have known that many debt buyers can only prove they often don't have all the documents to prove that they actually own the debt or that they can verify that the client is responsible for this outstanding debt. The second thing you want to do when you're trying to negotiate debt with a debtor or a creditor is to create a plan for a repayment or settlement with your client. Walk through the client's finances and monthly obligations. Determine what is affordable each month while leaving room for emergencies or daily living expenses. If feasible, offer a lump sum to settle the entire debt. It's only if it's feasible for your client to I guess, give up such a large sum of money at one time. The third thing you want to do is you want to explain to the client that their offer may not be accepted by the creditor. What we want to do here is we want to make sure that the client is aware that the creditor makes the decisions on whether or not they will accept your settlement offer. Especially because with this part, you want to set the expectation with your client. Expectation setting is very important. We want the client to feel empowered that they're going to be able to settle their debt, but we also want them to be aware of the realistic and practical outcomes that may occur when we are trying to negotiate or repay outstanding debt. So when we are talking about repaying debt or settling outstanding debt, we often want to also look at the race equity context of debt collection. Many times the history of racial inequity in our society has often caused a lot of the people who we see in our clinics or who come to MVLS. That history has impacted them like through redlining and reverse redlining. So in 2017, the Justice Gap Report issued by the National Legal Service Corporation found that 71% of low-income households experienced one civil legal problem that year, at least one civil legal problem that year, including problems with health care, housing conditions, disability access, veterans benefits, and domestic violence. 86% of low-income folks with legal issues have insufficient or no access to legal help. And this is often the result of, historically laws that were put in place back like in the past that's impact is being felt even today. We have this moment in COVID-19 right now where the majority of the people being impacted by unemployment and rising poverty are Black and brown families who are holding the majority of unemployment, but also the most of debt in the middle of the pandemic. As well as when we're looking at how the economy is recovering, it's recovering in a K-shaped recovery pattern, which essentially is there are some people who are recovering faster with little to no impact on their finances, and then there are the other people who have a slower race to recovery, and most of the people who are having the slower, longer, and the greatest financial impact of recovery are Black and brown workers and Asian American businesses. So when we are looking to help clients in making their settlements and repayments, it's good to have this information in the back of our heads when we are trying to help them negotiate their debt or manage their debts. While we do debt collection cases, we look at who is being sued by debt creditors and debt buyers. When we were mapping out our data at MVLS, we've seen that MVLS data on debt collection statewide is that 80% of our clients are Black and are subject to creditor harassment. A ProPublica report from some years ago also stated that debt collection nationwide, the majority of cases are filed against residents of Black and brown communities. So this is why race equity in debt collection or in debt collection cases can be important. Next, we'll be talking about building equitable relationships.
So when we're talking about building equitable relationships, there are kind of three things that we can do when we're working with clients to kind of create a more functional relationship and empower the client, because that's really what we want to do. The first is active listening. And so, we are often the experts in an unfair system, and when we're attempting to negotiate debt with a client and we're attempting to walk them through a process that they don't understand, it can be really important to still hear the client on what it is that they want to accomplish, how they feel, let them feel heard, because especially if we're not going to be able to get a resolution that is going to be ideal for the client, where there are going to be frustrating components, we want them to feel as though they've at least been heard out, that someone understands where they're coming from. The second step is valuing the client's experience. They're going to come to you where they are there, and not everyone is going to have the same faith in the process, same faith in what can be worked out, same faith in kind of what, the justice system, things like that. And so valuing their experience and valuing where they're coming from is going to work to kind of make that a more equitable relationship between you and the client. And then the third thing that we want to do is make sure that we're coming to the client with a non-judgmental attitude. Clients come to us with they may be carrying a nice bag or have a nice phone or something like that, and there are no correct choices about kind of what somebody should or shouldn't do with their money. There are just different choices that people make, and that phone or that bag, that may be the one nice thing that they have, and so just approaching it that whatever has happened in the past, it is what it is, and we're only trying to help the client move forward now. And so those are the three steps that we want to encourage anybody working with especially with the low-income population, to create this equitable relationship and kind of break down some of the issues, especially that are caused from those race equity disparities that Asia was talking about.
So when we're talking about prioritizing debts, debts can be prioritized from high priority to low priority. It's important to know that non-payment of high priority debts have dire consequences for your clients. And these debts have to be dealt with immediately. If they aren't, your client can end up losing their home or their transportation or things that are necessary for their day-to-day lives. There are also some debts that can be put off for a while, but when you wait too long to handle these debts, they quickly become high priority. When prioritizing debt, it's definitely important to keep everyday living necessities ahead of anything else. So we're going to talk about some of the outstanding debts that should be prioritized over others. So our first set of high priority debts are things are related to day-to-day living and living necessities: rent, home mortgage, and utilities. Rent is very important because maybe 2 months of non-payment will lead to a swift eviction for your client. And evictions in Maryland, currently, traditionally they happen pretty quickly once they get into court. Currently, with the moratoriums in place, evictions are halted for the time period, but those moratoriums are soon to be lifted. Currently, mortgages, clients should continue to pay their mortgages as best as they can. If the mortgage payments are becoming unaffordable, have the client or with your client contact the lender to see what options are available for your client. I mean, many lenders offer temporary hardship forbearance plans or repayment plan options. If your client has a long-term hardships, they have the option of doing modifications. In light of COVID right now, there are moratoriums for mortgages in place right now. If your client has a federally backed mortgage like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD, or FHA, the foreclosures are stayed until June 30th. The next important debt that needs to be paid are utilities, gas, electric, and water. Um, there are many resources available for to help clients pay their utility bills. There is the energy assistance. We've provided the information in the slide. You have BGE offers energy assistance and hardship programs to help with gas and electric repayment plans. There's also the Office of Home Energy that also assist with clients in repaying back utilities.
All right. So I'm going to jump in about auto loans, but just to make one quick point of clarification about rent. So Asia did mention that, in fact, there are a number of situations where eviction for non-payment of rent is on hold, and that is going to potentially require the completion of a form from the CDC. There are a couple of other situations, and then actually there are some other additional situations that are a little bit different than eviction for non-payment that are unfortunately not stayed, and so it does vary a bit. And so just the important thing is that if someone gets a summons requesting that they go to court for some sort of eviction proceeding, that they attend and communicate that if they've experienced a loss of income related to COVID. And then about utilities, there's some exciting news very recently from our Public Service Utility Commission saying that if folks apply for those benefits that Asia was talking about, that they won't be subject to shut off for at least a couple of months, which is good news. We don't want people getting their utilities shut off. So Auto loans. You know, this can potentially fall. This has a lot to do with kind of how your client uses their car and kind of what they need their car for, and whether or not transportation, you know, to and from their work, or to and from the doctor's office, or to and from the places that they need to go, is accessible for them. There was a hold put in place about no repossessions, but that is no longer in effect. And so it's important that if your client is attempting to work through, you know, what can they do there, it can be important to potentially call the lender and see if there are some options for them that may be in fact the best option to do, and then just trying to explore some of those, see what those other potential options are, to see if there's a way to kind of get around not having a car. Obviously, public transit is great if it's accessible for the client. You know, Uber and Lyft, that can be tricky, because that could potentially be a reduced cost if they are not going many places often, but that could be obviously considerably more. So it can be, we can walk through with our clients to figure out what is going to be workable and non-workable for them. But you know, it's certainly one of those situations where a few missed payments can result in going from having a car to having the car repossessed. So let's move on to medium priority debts that can easily become high priority debts. Income taxes, we know that those can result in garnishments when there's on either tax refunds, bank accounts, wages, and even some federal benefits that can be that can result in those garnishments. There can be liens placed on the home, and so something that is not one of those high priority debts that's necessary for daily living can mean can quickly result in a cascade of negative consequences. The same is true with real estate taxes. So we are entering tax sale season right now. Some counties in Maryland have postponed their tax sale process for this year, including Prince George's County. Baltimore City has not yet done that. The non-payment of property taxes can be this, it can fall lower on the list of things that have to be done, but it can potentially result in the loss of a home. And so the one thing that we always talk about is the importance of applying for the homeowner's property tax credit every year. It is this tax credit that is based off of income, and so if someone experiences a loss of income, especially if it's due to COVID, that can be an important component of getting them access to the services that they need in order to help them remain in their home, help them be able to pay those real estate taxes. And then federal student loans. Right now, people who are working with federal student loans are in a temporary hold until the end of September. No payments have to be made, and no additional interest is being assessed. But falling behind on student loans in not the moment that we're currently in, but can potentially result in garnished wages, bank accounts, and potentially a portion of Social Security payments being seized and tax refunds being seized. If we are outside the moment that we are currently in, or even right now, it is possible for clients to apply for income-based repayment. And in income-based repayment, payments can be as low as $0. And so that is something important to know. And that's one of those things that, again, has to be applied for every year, which can be difficult. It can be difficult for a client to potentially do on their own. So looking now at what we should put as our lowest priorities. You know, how people feel about where these debts should potentially fall is going to be very personal. If we think about things like debt owed to friends and family, that may be in fact incredibly important that they repay it to that friend or family member. But if we're talking to them about kind of prioritizing, you know, those most important needs, it's critical to think about them. It's critical to think through like what can potentially be done. We definitely know that you know, private student loans will sue and potentially garnish wages, but it is lower on the list, and they can't go after, and they won't go after Social Security, and they can't garnish federal refunds or federal state refunds. And so these are all sorts of debts that credit cards, deficiency after a car has been repossessed. These are all things that can result in a wage garnishment that can be quite a bit further down the line. With credit cards, for instance, there are when we were talking about negotiating, this is one of the best places to negotiate. This is also true with private student loans. There are options to negotiate, especially after it enters a collection phase. And even with deficiency actions for cars, there's a lot of opportunity for negotiation. Medical debt is definitely a unique kind of debt in that it's probably going to be on the lowest part, because there are other avenues to explore in terms of repayment, so it is important that the client seek either to apply for medical assistance, or that they apply for some form of what may be called charity care, or may be called the financial assistance program at a hospital. This is not necessarily true for doctors' offices, or other kind of outpatients kind of things. But if we're talking about hospital bills specifically, hospitals, the nonprofit hospitals in Maryland, of which almost all of the hospitals are, they are required to have these financial assistance programs that can be very beneficial. They can have incredibly low payments, no interest, and a portion of the bills can be waived, or in fact, all of the bill could potentially be waived. And so it's important to pursue those to help keep things manageable, and that would potentially help the client reduce their debt burden. So I don't see any questions that have come through. If anyone has any questions about any different kinds of debt, or kind of how to approach dealing with them and how to and prioritizing them, we're happy to answer any of those questions now. We have an upcoming training on understanding and enhancing client capacity, which is going to be a great training. We also have a variety of previously recorded trainings that go into all of the different kinds of topic areas that MVLS can take cases in, and there are some other trainings that are just important kind of business or soft skills, and those are great as well. And then finally, I just want to mention that if you are not currently a volunteer and you want to be, attorneys, CPAs, etc., can be volunteers with us. And then Asia and I are also available if anyone has any questions after the presentation, and please reach out to us. Since there are no questions that have come through, I want to thank everyone who has joined us today. I hope this has been valuable information, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. So I hope everyone has a great day.